Hey, so I'm gonna share some thoughts again. I laugh because I share these thoughts with I shared them with with a friend just in the general conversation, and they're like, "You need to do thoughts on this," and I was like, "You know what? That's actually pretty decent." I actually had to go back and listen to what I said. I was like, I don't even remember sharing anything that would be that good. Anyways, I'm sitting out here under my palms in a sweatshirt because it's cold in Florida. Brr. Uh, So the these are thoughts on what I would call the sanctification of biblical characters. When I do the epic narrative, right, we dig into culture, we dig into vocabulary, we dig into languages and archaeology, and anyways, we dig into a lot of things. And one of the things we don't do is skip a verse. And what I've run into are these verses that are like, wait a minute. This was a hero of the faith. Like I grew up in church, but I just think that there's a lot of whitewashing and flat out hiding of the lack of character that so many you know heroes of the faith have. I know we have some famous ones, right? Oh, David raped Bathsheba. Oh, but he felt really bad about it. He wrote Psalm 51. He felt really, really bad. So we've all been there, you know, murdered somebody, raped somebody. Yeah. So we just kind of move it over into this. Isn't it great that God forgives? Absolutely, it is great. But like, what about a few other things that he was involved in, like horrible parenting? And you see that in the characteristics of his sons, that two of whom tried to have a coup and kill their father. Like, yeah, there's stuff there that needs to be worked through. You got Abraham. Abraham comes in, finally gets Isaac, whatever, almost sacrifices him because he thought that's what God wanted or would require of him, all that kind of stuff. And then Sarah dies, and it says he has multiple other wives and lots of other children. And then when he's going to die, he pays them all basically an inheritance and tells them to go away so that no one challenges Isaac as the firstborn and the one who should get the majority of the inheritance and the covenant. And I think, wait, I don't remember hearing this before. And I deal with it when, in Genesis, in the epic narrative. Yeah, we deal with Noah. But recently, like, I came across this other pattern that I see where God does something supernatural, and then the individual, the Bible hero, then pushes it beyond that and takes the authority that the Lord's given them and the freedom that the Lord's given them to make decisions, and they turn it into something that God never intended. And then, of course, they give God credit for it, and we all think, oh, well, then God must be really cool with this. And I would say, absolutely not. No, I don't think God is cool with that. But what God won't do is he's not going to give authority to somebody and then take it back, because that's not giving of authority. That's that's what a lot of humans do, right? You're in charge until you don't do it right, and then I'm going to take over again. I met a few pastors like that. I worked for a few as well. And you probably have too. But I thought of specifically, because I'm working on another season of the epic narrative, and I ran into Joshua. And in Joshua, God does this big miracle, gets him over in front of Jericho. He lets Joshua know that Jericho's very much afraid of what might happen. because Joshua has 30,000 troops from the 2.5 tribes that are staying on the other side of the Jordan. They already come over ready for battle. They're ready to go, right? And God says, listen, this is what I want you to do. I'm going to take down the walls, basically, of the city. And then he says, and you decide what you want to do after that. It's up to you. And Joshua, the walls come down, and Joshua, listen, unprovoked. Jericho never fired a shot. They didn't throw anything off the walls at these guys. Unprovoked. A miracle happens, whatever that is, the walls come down. And Joshua says, all right, let's kill every living thing and take, except for Rahab and her family, and then take the riches and give them to God. And I think, oh my gosh, like, you take that freedom and you turn God into this warmongering, bloodthirsty, genocidal maniac. And somehow Joshua is this amazing leader. Oh, we should study Joshua and his leadership. Joshua, I'm sorry, like, we got to take a better realistic look at this guy. He set Israel up, the Hebrews up. He set them up to be at war for now really thousands of years, right? Because even though they didn't wipe out everyone in the Promised Land, they were constantly at war. Canaanites, Ammonites, Hittites, did I say Ammonites? Anyways, they were all these, there was constantly these little uprisings, and people were like, well, that's because Joshua didn't finish the job. I'm thinking, no, it's because Joshua decided to go to war. Now, granted, I think Moses taught him that war was the way that the Lord wanted to take this, but we know from studying Abraham knew it wasn't war because he was like, I don't even know how I'm going to know when we have the Promised Land. Like, your plan, like, if I win all the battles, then I know. If I buy up all the land, then I know. But I don't know. How am I going to know when this thing's fulfilled? And God's like, well, you'll know because you're, basically the culture of the entire land will shift and they'll all be followers of me. So, I don't know. Moses taught Joshua. Joshua fulfilled what he thought Moses wanted to be done, but I don't think it was what God planned. But we skipped that part. And then you have these, the time of the judges. And again, you see the miraculous occur, and then somebody goes off on the authority and takes over. You look at Gideon. Gideon looks like a humble guy, hiding, is winnowing the wheat, in a well or whatever, which is a horrible place to do that, and etc. I'm sure you all have heard that, but I don't think he was humble. I think he had low self-esteem, and I base it on this. When the miracle happened and the Midianites turned on each other in the middle of the night and started killing each other, right? Gideon didn't have to kill anyone. The victory was secure. Midianites were scattered. They were all running home. It was Gideon who made the decision to call for arms from several tribes. And it was Gideon who told them to cut off the river so that they could catch them all. And it was Gideon who chased down the kings and killed them. The last two kings, he gives the sword to his son. I'll go into more detail in the narrative in my podcast, but he gives the sword to his son. His son doesn't want to kill the kings. So the kings kind of taunt him about being weak. So he grabs the sword and kills the two kings, just in cold blood. And then the people are like, be our king. And he's like, oh, no, God should be your king. And we all think, oh, this is so wonderful of Gideon. But then we keep reading, and what does he do? Well, he takes tribute from everyone. He makes a breastplate of about 45 pounds of gold, hangs it in a, basically what I would call like a little gazebo chapel thing, and people bring tribute and lay him there. In other words, they treat him like a king. And he starts making all kinds of trade deals and deals for protection and military deals. And in sealing up those deals, he obtains, it says, lots of concubines, and he had 70 sons. That's a lot of work. That's the kind of work a king would do. So he might have sounded humble, but everything about the story points to the fact that nope, he believed himself to be the ruler. And insecure people become like a tyrant when they're put in charge of things. And he raises these 70 sons. Well, probably all the sons' mothers did. All these half-brothers are running around. And his idea was, well, they'll run the country when I'm done, all of them. They'll figure it out. Kind of like, what is that show that there was it was called Succession. It's a fascinating TV show. Showtime, I think, had it. I don't know how I watched it. I've never owned Showtime, but amazing storylines about a father who pitted his children against each other to see who would become a successor to this multi-trillion-dollar business that he owned. Media empire. Anyways, enough about that show. So I kind of think that's what Gideon kind of set his kids up for. And so one of them, Abimelech, he goes to his mother's family in Shechem, and he's like, I think I should be king. Why should we have 70 rulers? And they're like, yeah, we agree. Your family. So he invites all his brothers in some sort of like red wedding scene from Game of Thrones. He kills 68 of his brothers. Kills them in cold blood. That's the son of Gideon. That's the type of children Gideon raised. Bloodthirsty tyrants. Maybe not all of them, but wow. The youngest one escaped. We'll go into details later, but Abimelech just becomes this tyrant ruler. And I think, why do we ignore these sort of things? We just, or we gloss over it by saying, I hear my little voice, my little Bob the engineer going, get back to the point, Bob, you're rambling. We take, what do I want to say? Specific sections of a life, and we say, he was wonderful. Everything he did was great. God sanctioned his whole life because he's in the Bible. And the Bible wouldn't, it has to be God's will. It was God's will that all those people died. So who are we to question? His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Well, Elijah or Elisha, right? They make fun of his bald head, and he calls out bears, and he mauls 42, youth, children, whatever. We're all like, well, God is the final judge, and he knew what God wanted to do. No, this guy was, let's not pretend that everything he did was infallible, inerrant. And I think some people get that. I know there's t-shirts and posters out there like, Noah was a drunk, David was a murderer, Abraham, whatever, and God used all of them, he can use you too. True, but why do so many preachers and teachers just make what they did okay because they were doing God's work? And I think it shows in so much of the church culture that if the pastor is successful, or if we like him, it doesn't matter what that pastor does, because we are going to gloss over it because it must be God's will. We do it. We do it. We still do it, right? Even if the pastor preaches things that we think, yes, like he's teaching the word. This is Jesus. And then he's literally messes things up really bad financially, or I don't know. Right? Sexual abuse is insane in the churches today. We just gloss it over. Elders gloss it over. We just ignore it. I know, a church I was a part of where, several times the pastor has been in tight situations, right? And the elders just, let's not ruin the legacy of Jesus in the community. I don't think that's what, if God wanted to do that, right, those things wouldn't be in the Bible. These little verses that make it clear that these people made some pretty bad decisions. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to Mary. Mary is the one who told me to put these thoughts out. She and I were going back and forth about Gideon. Anyways, appreciate your encouragement. And if you're out there and you hear these thoughts and you say, I wonder what Bob thinks about, ask me. I'll share my thoughts. Have a good day, everyone.